wondrous story. This story happened Asara B'Tevis in the yeshiva of Hebron. It was late in the afternoon. Rav Shalom still never knew why they started davening mincha very, very late that day. But for whatever reason it was, they started davening mincha very late. The Beis Medrash was packed with Rosh Yeshivas, with Talmidim, with Balabatim from the neighborhood. The Beis Medrash was packed. And it was very late, and the one who was saying Chazar Sashatz, the one who was repeating Shemoneh Esrei, realized that pretty soon the Shkia is going to come. And as he was going over the Shemoneh Esrei, repeating the Shemoneh Esrei, the boy at the Amid was beginning to wonder, what do I do with Tachnun? What do I do after Bein HaShmoshos? It's going to be after Bein HaShmoshos, after the sun has set. Are you supposed to say Tachnun or not? And as the boy was saying, Sholem Rov, and he came to Baruch Atah Hashem, HaMavorech Etzam Yisrael B'Sholem, and he's looking around. Rav Shalom happened to be standing nearby, and he says out loud, Yizgadal Yizgadash. So that meant to the fellow who was davening for the Amid that you say Kaddish and you don't say Tachnun. When the boy finished saying Kaddish, all of a sudden everybody noticed that the Mashgiach, Rabbi Paysach, who was like a lion, who had eyes that could pierce right through someone, that he's walking from his side of the Beis Medrash and he's walking towards the middle of the Beis Medrash and the Bima. And all eyes were on the Mashgiach. And when the boy finishes Kaddish, Rabbi claps on the table and he says in Yiddish, Mil beten alle Rosh Yeshivas from the Mizrachman, zon arech kumen, v'amohoven yes anay Rosh Yeshiva in the Yeshiva. Well, ask all the Rosh Yeshivas to come down because we now have a new Rosh Yeshiva in the Yeshiva. And everyone was paralyzed with fear because they knew that he was angry at Rav Shalom. And Rav Shalom told me his knees were trembling. And Rav Leib said, Mil beten denaya Rosh Yeshiva as uns bringen a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis. Well, ask the new Rosh Yeshiva to please bring us a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis. Rav Shalom said that as he was walking to the Sfarim shelf, he was hoping that the world would split open and he could fall right through. He didn't know how he was able to hold the Mishnah Berurah. His hands were trembling. He brought the Mishnah Berurah to the middle of the Bima. And the Beis Medrash was stone silent. And the Mashgiach says to him, Mishuf Tesimin Kuf Lamed Aleph Sif Gimel. And he tells him to read out loud. This is what it says there. Ein Nefilas Apayim Balayla. You don't say Tachnun at night. And the Mishnah Berurah Sifkot Yudzayin says, therefore, if Mincha goes till nightfall, then you don't say Tachnun. Ubein HaShmoshos. But if it's only after sunset, no Yagin Lipol. You do say Tachnun. So Rav Shalom was wrong. And then the Mashgiach said, Mongein Vaita. And they all said Aleinu. And Rav Shalom, after Mincha, left the Beis Medrash and he didn't come back. He stayed in his room for one full day without looking at anyone. Maybe somebody brought him some food after the Tainus, but he would not walk into the Beis Medrash. Another day went by and he stayed locked in his room. And after the second day, the Mashgiach sent somebody to call him. And he said, I can't come. I cannot walk into that Beis Medrash anymore. And then the Mashgiach sent another boy for him. And when he sent the second boy, Rav Shalom came in. And the Mashgiach looked at him. And he said to him, I know what I did. You will be built from this story, from this episode. And you will grow and you'll be better because of it. And years later, he certainly couldn't have said it then. Years later, Rav Shalom would say to those he was close with, the Mashgiach ripped out half of the cancer of gaiva that I had within me. I only wish he would have ripped it all out of me. Only Rav Shalom could have said that. Only his Rebbe could have known that that child would not be destroyed from it. It's not anything for any Rebbe or any Mashgiach or any parent to do today. We could destroy a child forever. But somehow that Rebbe had that relationship and that understanding of his Talmud that he knew he could rip out from him that gaiva that he felt that he had. And Rav Shalom was forever grateful to his Rebbe that he had done that for him. And because Rav Shalom knew from his Rebbe when to be strong and when to be soft. He became the most powerful speaker in Klal Yisrael in his era, in his prime. And the people like the Chazaynish, the Gedolim like the Chazaynish and the Brisker Rov, they always asked him to be the head speaker when it came against Giyus Bonais, getting women into the army. Against Chilul Shabbos, he was the main speaker. When it came to starting Pe'ilim, Rabbi Issa Zalman had him as one of the main people to start Pe'ilim in Eretz Yisrael. When it came to speak against Metuche Mason, he was the one that was the main speaker. And when he would get up to say Tillim, he could say Tillim with his great voice. Maskila David b'Yosef Amahor Tefillah. Thousands and thousands of people would shake the walls of an auditorium. Or he could lead thousands at the Kaisel with Tillim. And it was unforgettable for those who were there. I want to tell you a very painful story. A very personal, painful story about the last time that I saw Rav Shalom. It was very difficult for me in the last years to visit him. Because I remembered when he was a Sha'arei Chesed at his home in 17 Sha'arei Chesed, anytime he walked in, unless of course it was Monday and Thursday, and even then he would smile and laugh, that he always did. But at night, or those days when he was talking, it was always with a smile, always with a good word, always with a story. One of the greatest nights of my life, I described in that book, Around the Maggid's Table. What it meant to sit in the sukkah of Rav Shalom and watch all the people just bask in his glorious smile and listen to those stories. It was Gan Eden on this world to be with him when he was with his brothers-in-law, Rav Shlomo Zalman and Rav Raphael, and all those people and his children and grandchildren. It was electrifying. But as he got older and he began to get forgetful and he began to lose that smile and to lose that radiance and not be able to take care of himself, it became very painful to look at him. Because he wasn't anymore the great, jovial Rav Shalom that we all knew and loved. And then Nebuch, he had to leave his home in Yerushalayim, and he moved in with his daughter in Bnei Brak, with the Ariel family. And he had a room that they built for him, and he used to sit in his wheelchair. And every time I went to Eretz Yisrael, just about every time, I used to go in, and the first thing that I said to him right away, as soon as I walked in, was I would say, Rav Shalom does a Pesach, because I didn't even want that he should think for a second maybe he didn't know this person, because I'm sure that it had to be painful for him if he didn't recognize somebody. So right away I said my name to him. And I would try to make conversation. It was very, very difficult. And I remember the last time that I was there with my mother, I was there with one of my sons-in-law and one of my sons. And I went in and I tried to make conversation. And it wasn't going. And I felt so bad because I didn't see him for months at a time. And I wanted to have a pleasant memory. And I would try to tell him something and he would just answer with one-word sentences, and he just sat there, almost afraid. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, maybe I would remind him of one of those stories that he told so many times. And maybe that would tick off something in his mind. And so I said to him, Rav Shalom, the name's America. And then he smiled. He said, it's a basement. The Eibusher told him. So I thought, this is terrific. I'll tell him a story that he always used to tell over, and it'll get him going. So I was trying to think what other story, when you're trying to think on the spot. I said, Rav Shalom, the G'nei Tzavaran Kalina, mit the apple. And he started laughing, and he said, ich mach a brocha. Ich nehm the apple to machen a brocha, and you make a brocha to eat the apple. So I saw I was on a roll. So then I was trying desperately to continue this. And then I thought of another story, and I said a word, and the second I said the word, I regretted it. I said to him, I'm Shalom the G'nei the Talasol. Boy, the second I said it, I knew it was the worst thing to say. Because before the Maggid Speaks came out, he called me up and said, you got to print this one more story. The story was about a man who was once walking in the street, and he heard a cry, and he didn't know where the cry was coming from. And he walked into an apartment house, and he sees nobody's there, but the cry's coming from upstairs. So he goes upstairs, the door is open, and it sounds like a child is crying. And he walks into the house, and there's no child there. And he walks to where he hears the